Live NFL trivia every Wednesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge for a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. There are some incredible moments in NFL history where a player comes out of retirement and shocks just about everyone with how well he plays. Falcons quarterback Scott Hunter, 1 year removed from retirement, coming off of the bench against the Saints and leading Atlanta to a victory while throwing 2 touchdown passes and posting a perfect passer rating. Seahawks running back Marshawn Lynch coming out of retirement and scoring 4 rushing touchdowns in 3 games. Falcons quarterback Steve DeBerr coming out of retirement at 44 years old and coming off of the bench to complete 70% of his passes and beat the Saints. There are so many good moments and stories that I would be here all day if I listed every single one of them. This is not one of those moments. In fact, this is the exact opposite. This is a story about a quarterback who came out of retirement despite having no intentions of ever playing again. The quarterback then got his moment to shine and got an opportunity to put together a Cinderella story on Monday Night Football that seemed to be made for Hollywood. And then he proceeded to have an atrocious game that had him questioning why he ever came back in the first place. In 1991, that's exactly what happened to Philadelphia Eagles quarterback Pat Ryan. And this is the story behind the worst comeback in Eagles history. Before I talk about the game in question, we need some context to understand just who Pat Ryan is, why he came out of retirement, and why he was even playing in the first place. Our story begins all the way back in 1978, when the New York Jets drafted the Tennessee quarterback in the 11th round of the NFL Draft. When the Jets drafted Ryan, they were just hoping that he would be a quality depth piece behind Richard Todd, the team's first-round pick from a few years before. Between Todd and Matt Robinson, Ryan had an uphill climb to make it onto the roster and establish himself as an NFL player. However, it's safe to say that Ryan turned out to be a fantastic pick for the Jets. Anytime an 11th round pick taken 281st overall turns out to be anything of note, you know you did something right. And I don't think anyone, not even Pat Ryan himself, saw Pat Ryan playing with the Jets until 1989. He lasted 12 seasons in New York, primarily serving as the backup quarterback behind Richard Todd and Ken O'Brien during that time. He was one of the most reliable and dependable backup quarterbacks in all of football. Through the good times and the bad, through the chaos and dysfunction that the Jets organization was sometimes in during the late 70s and 80s, Ryan was there and got the opportunity to start 19 games, going 11-8 in that stretch. And there were some pretty solid and memorable moments in there. He was the starting quarterback for the Jets in their 1986 wildcard victory over the Kansas City Chiefs, where in a 35-15 win, he threw 3 touchdown passes and finished the game with an incredible passer rating of 127.4. He threw the game-winning touchdown in overtime of a 1987 game against the Miami Dolphins, where with the game tied at 31 apiece, he hit Eddie Hunter on an 8-yard pass for the win. And in the fourth quarter of a 1984 game against the Buffalo Bills, he threw a 36-yard touchdown to Wesley Walker that was the dagger, and practically put the game out of reach. Ryan played 12 seasons in New York, going from a no-name quarterback who was going to battle just for his job security to one of the best backups in all of football. But after the 1989 season, it looked like his NFL career was coming to an end. In the 1990 offseason, when Bruce Coslett became the new head coach and when Dick Steinberg became the new general manager, the Jets knew that they needed to make some changes, and it seemed like the two men didn't want to keep Pat Ryan around. They left him unprotected in free agency, which makes sense, as he was going to be a 35-year-old quarterback who would be third string at best behind Ken O'Brien and Tony Eason, and because the Jets were in somewhat of a rebuilding phase. As Ryan said on his departure from the team, the Jets are building and going in a whole new direction, so I don't have any animosity. I want to keep playing at least another year. I believe I've got something to offer somebody. Unfortunately for him, there weren't too many of these opportunities. He signed with the Browns midway through the preseason, but never made it onto the team, as it was an already crowded quarterback room. By the time Ryan signed with the Browns, the team already had 4 additional quarterbacks on the roster, including the likes of Bernie Kosar, Mike Pagel, and Jeff Graham. And with the writing seemingly on the wall after he didn't make the Browns roster, Ryan began to think about life after football. He was not going to try to get back into the game. He was hanging it up and calling it quits. After more than a decade in the NFL, and after a solid 12-year career, Ryan was ready for the next step. He began doing construction work in Knoxville, Tennessee, as he was working as a building contractor. Even though Ryan stayed in shape and worked out regularly, he was obviously not used to the speed of the NFL game anymore, and understandably so. Ryan even went as far as putting in his retirement papers. Instead of spending Sundays on the field, he was spending his Sundays on the golf course, with his mind for the most part removed from the game that he played for so many years. After not playing in 1990 and not being in training camp or on any opening day roster for the start of 1991, no one was expecting Ryan to come back and continue his football career. However, he was about to get an unexpected opportunity to make his mark in the NFL one more time. At the start of the 1991 season, The Philadelphia Eagles had no controversy at quarterback whatsoever. Randall Cunningham was an absolute star. He was coming off of an incredible 1990 season where he threw a career-high 30 touchdowns, finishing second in the league. He got some serious consideration for the MVP, coming second in the voting with 18 votes behind Joe Montana, who had 26. And on top of that, he was coming off of 3 straight Pro Bowl appearances. Cunningham was one of the best quarterbacks in football, and if the Eagles were going to do anything in 1991, it was going to be because of his talent. That lasted less than a half. On opening day against the Green Bay Packers, he tore multiple ligaments in his left knee after getting hit low. There's a reason hits like this are outlawed today, because this just looks nasty. Just like that, Cunningham was out for the rest of the season. While all this was happening, Pat Ryan was on the golf course, paying no real attention to anything happening around the NFL. When made aware of the news, he made a mental note of it, but expected nothing to come of it, since obviously he had been out of the game for more than a year, and as he said, "I figured they'd pick up somebody who had been playing." He figured wrong. The head coach of the Eagles was Rich Kotite. This is not the first time Kotite has done something questionable, as I made a video about a really bad decision he made later on in his tenure with the Eagles. So if you want to learn more about that and some of the most brain-dead coaching you're ever going to see in your life, then click the card in the upper right corner. Prior to becoming the head coach of the Eagles, Kotite was a longtime assistant on the Jets, and served for 5 seasons as the team's offensive coordinator. In 1986, when Ryan had that great performance in the postseason, it was Kotite who was commanding the offense. Kotite just needed a quarterback at this point who knew the offensive terminology, and didn't have to be taught anything. He brought Ryan in for a workout, and he was impressed enough where he signed Ryan. At 36 years old, after being more than a year removed from the game, and after being moments away from cashing in his retirement checks, completely detaching himself from the sport, Pat Ryan was officially back. And oh god, it was a train wreck. September 30th, 1991. Philadelphia is traveling to RFK Stadium to take on Washington in this NFC East matchup on Monday Night Football. To say that this is a monumental game would be an understatement. Washington is undefeated, entering this game at 4-0. Philadelphia enters this one at 3-1. The winner of this game takes first place in the NFC East, and if it's Washington who comes out on top, then they'll have a 2-game cushion past the quarter mark, which is always a good sign. Starting under center for the Eagles, as had been the case for every game after the Cunningham injury, was Jim McMahon. Pat Ryan was riding the bench, like he had been doing for most of his career, and was not expecting to get in the game whatsoever. As you can probably guess based off the title of the video, Ryan wouldn't be on the bench for long. After McMahon sprained his right ankle on this play right here, it was Ryan's turn to enter the game. He hadn't thrown a pass since December 10th, 1989, more than 600 days ago. And now, the man who was retired at the start of the month was playing in front of a national television audience against an undefeated team, and he was the main man responsible for leading a comeback. I'm sure it can't be that bad. I'm sure Ryan will be just fine. Oh boy. If that first pass is any indication, with him overthrowing a guy on a wide open screen pass, this is gonna be a long day. Sure enough, it was. Ryan played most of the game and it was an absolute disaster. Now normally with a video like this, I would go drive by drive, almost like I did with Terry Bradshaw's worst game as a Steeler, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. However, if I did that, I think everyone's eyes would burn from just how awful the quarterback play was. So here's just a summary of what Ryan did on this day. In the 23-0 loss, Ryan went 4 for 14 with 24 yards passing. The Eagles picked up 4 first downs on the entire night, and after the opening drive of the game with McMahon, where the Eagles picked up 43 yards, the Eagles had 46 yards for the rest of the game. If you factor in the 2 sacks that Ryan took for a loss of 13 yards, with him in the game, the Eagles had 11 net passing yards. The Eagles held onto the ball for just 21 minutes, which is not surprising when your quarterback is completing a mere 28.5% of his passes. Not only did he throw no touchdowns, but he threw 3 interceptions, and finished the game with a passer rating of 0.0. It literally does not get any worse than that. You could make a legitimate argument that this was the worst game that any quarterback has ever played on Monday Night Football, and considering the fact that there have been close to 800 games and 1,600 quarterback performances, that's saying something. By every metric imaginable, this was a disaster. And to the surprise of no one after watching this game, this comeback of his was incredibly short-lived. After the game, Ryan spoke to the press about whatever the heck just happened on the field. And it was a bit of a weird press conference. He took blame for the loss, saying that his play has a lot to do with what happens on the offensive side of the ball. But he also said that no one offensively played great. He said that he wasn't rusty and that he didn't see any orange on his body, but at the same time, that it took some time to get used to the speed of the game and that he didn't get a lot of work. There were a lot of contradictions in this press conference. And in the understatement of the century, he said on his play, "I've had better experiences. I'll say that much." You can say that again. Ryan would get one more opportunity to play, when he came off of the bench in Week 7 against the New Orleans Saints. while not as big of a disaster as the Washington game, because let's be honest, the bar was set so low that there was nowhere to go but up, it was still really bad, as he completed only 50% of his passes while throwing no touchdowns and 1 interception in a 13-6 loss. He also finished that game with an abysmal passer rating of 34.7, which is worse than if he did nothing but spike the ball into the ground on every single play. Afterwards, the Eagles would sign Jeff Kemp and would waive Pat Ryan, officially ending his NFL career. He would not get any more opportunities in the NFL, and would return to his construction job in Tennessee. Not every story about a player coming out of retirement can be a success story. Sometimes, there are players where it was very clear and obvious that they should have stayed retired, and with Pat Ryan, that was definitely the case. He had a very solid NFL career. For an 11th round pick drafted in 1978 to play with the same team until 1989 and even win a playoff game with some touchdown passes is great. But for some NFL fans, particularly those of the Philadelphia area, his lasting legacy isn't as the longtime dependable backup quarterback to the Jets, but rather as the quarterback who came out of retirement and proceeded to play some of the worst football imaginable. Get your official Jaguar Gamer 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot, and be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes, link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9 and subscribe to 60-Second NFL History on YouTube. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.